Deion Sanders was on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast, and he talked about Travis Hunter and his son Shedeur. And here's Deion. He says, quote, "I know where I want them to go. So in certain cities, that ain't going to happen. It's going to be in Eli," unquote. I would just like to quickly make the point that he is not Travis Hunter's daddy. Like, I do think that that's an important thing to point out here, is that Deion can have all the suggestions that he wants. And I don't necessarily know how I feel about flexing like this about his own son, because his son is an adult, but that other boy is not yours. So like, let's I'm sure that Travis Hunter and his people will listen to Deion here, but let's just keep this straight. But anyway, Sean, he said, go to be an Eli, and the Eli is basically how Eli Manning, and more specifically how Archie Manning got Eli out of San Diego and got him to New York. A fascinating trade that I'm going to try to get to in a little while, because we've been running a little long, but it's a fascinating, there's so many fascinating levels to that trade when you stop and think about it. But this is what I found interesting about what Deion had to say. Deion said there were certain cities that fit, talking about for him. Atlanta fit. I want that for my kids, all of them. I want the right fit. It was the first time I saw black people in positions of authority. It blew my mind. It was real in Atlanta. I had never seen anything like that in my life. And I found that to be such a fascinating statement, because Archie Manning it seemed at least, that he was deathly afraid that Eli was going to live the life that he lived, running around trying to save himself because he was on a bad team, except the difference is Eli's slow. So he wouldn't have been able to run around and save himself. He just died. I wonder this all the time. Archie Manning got to be ashamed at how slow them boys are, right? Like, the first one at least could play wide receiver. I just can't believe Archie Manning, every time I'd watch them boys, I'd be just terribly afraid to my boys. I'm just ashamed that my boys was so slow. Like they so slow, you know they can't dance. And I can't dance either. So I'm not saying that as a judgment. But anyway, like, Archie was afraid that would happen to his kids. And so he wanted to make sure that Eli went to a solid football organization. Deion had decided that he was willing to play for the Falcons. The Falcons of 1989. That is the least football decision anybody has ever made. Oh my God, what a terrible idea. Now, he also said on the podcast that specifically talking about his son, he says he doesn't want Shedeur going anywhere cold, which a little bit tricky, but okay. But he says here that he told him that there were certain cities that fit, and the cities that he mentioned were San Francisco, Dallas, Washington, and Baltimore, along with other spots. I would like to quickly point out, Sean, do you know what San Francisco, Dallas, Washington, and Baltimore all have in common?
What?
Deion played for all of them. I don't know how much that matters. I don't know how much that counts. Deion played for all of them. But again, this is clearly not a list based on football. Baltimore is not drafting your son, period. Right? We all understand that. Like, that's not a place that would ever take his son. If you're willing to send your son to Washington, we call what they call a DPS, DFAX. They got all CPS. They all kinds of names in different cities for those people. If you're willing to send your son to Washington, I don't know what the hell else you've done to him. Dallas, I don't think is going to be in the market for him. I don't know what Kyle Shanahan likes in a quarterback. Maybe he is, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But I don't think that either Hunter or Shedeur are players who will have the ability to steer their fortunes in that way. And look, y'all know me. If you know anything about me, I am the person who champions the abolition of the NFL draft because I find it to be patently unfair. And I will 100% support any player, no matter who it is, who says, I don't want to go to this place where I've been drafted, therefore I am not going to go. I'm on that team. I don't care if it's Deion Sanders or anybody else that's making that argument. I'm with you. If you got the game to pull this off, then you go ahead and pull this off. I'm just saying you're going to need one hell of an agent in order to have the game to pull that off with these guys. Now, maybe Shedeur comes out and he is the number one quarterback in this draft. The argument against that is last year he was at best the number 4 quarterback in the Pac-12. But those guys are gone and they might all get drafted in the first round for whatever it's worth. He could come out and be that guy, that number 1 pick in the draft sort of player. But how many people are going to feel that way, and how many people are going to be willing to move up to get you? And this part is very important here, okay? Is this league going to click up and say we not having this? Because that's what it felt like they were trying to make the point of with Lamar Jackson. When you had people making announcements, they wasn't going to go after Lamar Jackson. That could have used Lamar Jackson really bad. Now, you can make the argument, and this is what people do when it comes to that, because it's specifically in reference to the Falcons. And they say, well, Baltimore was going to match any offer anyway, Okay, that's fine. Make them do it. And if that's the case, cool. You don't have to put out an announcement that says that you don't want him. You didn't put out an announcement that said that you wanted Deshaun Watson's old nasty ass, right? You don't have to apprise us of every move that you gonna make. You don't have to. That's not required, right? But they wanted us to know that. And so it was a fair question for a lot of people to ask if the league decided to click up and say, no, we're not going to let this man dictate what's going on. That very same league could click up and do the same thing to Shedeur Sanders. And so if that happens, if I'm not mistaken, you go back into the draft the next year. Maybe he can afford to miss them checks, right? I don't recall Travis Hunter's daddy being Deion Sanders. Therefore, I'm not really sure that he could afford to do such a thing. I also don't know with Travis Hunter. He's not big. Like, he got folded up in that game last year where he missed all them weeks. And that was not, like, I think there are going to be real questions about size for him in the NFL, especially if he wants to play corner, right? Like, maybe he could become some super shifty slot guy or whatever as a receiver. Like, maybe that's possible. But I think there's going to be some real questions about him playing defense, just about in terms of durability. Because you go look at him play, man, he just doesn't seem to be that big or really had a kind of frame that's going to allow him to get that much bigger. Like, I just don't know if they're going to have the game or the sway, or maybe they have the greatest agents ever that will allow them to manipulate the draft in your favor. But I raised this question about the manipulation of the draft, right? And again, do what you want to do. I support you. I'm just saying that the decision to manipulate the draft, or you go into one of these places that seems terrible or whatever, I ain't always been right in the way that I thought that things would go. And the teams that get engaged in these things and the players who get engaged in them haven't always necessarily been right either. Case in point, I absolutely thought that Joe Burrow should find a way to not go play for the Cincinnati Bengals. Hard stop. Like, I mean, they used to make dudes reuse jock straps. I'm not making that up. Like, that's what they're about. They just the notoriously cheap whatever organization and everything else. They have flourished since Joe Burrow got there. Part of that's drafting Jamar Chase. Part of that seems to be a declining role of Mike Brown in the organization, where Mike Brown was typically the biggest problem. But I absolutely would have told the dude not to go to Cincinnati. And the Cincinnati thing, at least heretofore, has gone very well. And they've gone to a Super Bowl, and Joe Burrow's getting his money, even though, I mean, all those things, right? It looks a lot better there now than it would have otherwise. Okay. I talked about the Eli Manning trade in 2004. Here's what's so interesting about that. And it's interesting also because Drew Brees wound up being good. And so Phillip Rivers, after he held out, didn't even play for 2 years after they thought he was going to take the job. Drew Brees was so sorry that in 2004, he won Comeback Player of the Year and he had never been hurt. He just came back from being sorry. Like, I don't even know how it was a comeback. How's it a comeback if you ain't been here in the first place? But whatever. That's where it stood with that. But the thing for Archie was he thought that the Chargers were a poor organization. And at that point, there were reasons to think that it was a poor organization, and he did not want his son to get stuck playing for a poor organization. That was in 2004. In 2006, the Chargers were the best team in the NFL. Now, the problem, of course, is they were also the Chargers. But part of why we have the perception of the Chargers that we have is because of what happened in 2006, where they had that game against the Patriots, even had the interception that might have iced the game before they fumbled it and the Patriots got the ball back, basically turned the interception into 20-some yards going down the field. But in 2006, remember this, that trade that the Giants made to get Eli Manning, they had to give up their first-round pick the next year, and the first-round pick the next year was Sean Merriman. Like, they gave up a lot in order to make that happen. And they got the quarterback who wasn't as good. You will never convince me that Eli Manning was a better quarterback than Phillip Rivers. I don't give a damn how many Super Bowls Eli Manning won with the Giants. I don't care how many Super Bowl MVPs he won with the Giants. I was there. I'm going to say it again, all right? I was there. He wasn't the Heat like that. I think we all know he wasn't the Heat like that. But somehow the Giants got the worst player, and it worked. somehow the Chargers wound up not winning the Super Bowls, and it worked. Like, Phillip Rivers is legend of franchise, all of that stuff. Like, somehow it worked. But the Eli Manning concern about the franchise was ultimately proven to be unfounded. Like, that wasn't really the case. Go look at the Giants now. Do the Giants look like a well-run franchise? And even at that time, keeping in mind that the only playoff games they won in the Eli Manning era came in those Super Bowl years, were they really that great a run franchise? Right? Now, the John Elway example, of course, is a great one because the Colts were so bad, everybody could see that one. And it ain't really getting no better for a long time. They basically needed Bob Irsay to die. Like, every time any of y'all who think that Jim Irsay is crazy, please understand he an upgrade from the last one. But anyway, that move there clearly worked for John Elway. Like, I think there's no question about that. And he did wind up going to a well-run organization. I'm just saying that I'm down for the guys to try to make it happen as they want with the draft. I'm just saying, trying to figure out how to maneuver it, that part is really, really tricky. And it is fascinating to see the things that Deion Sanders prioritizes, because he does not seem to care that much about the quality of the organizations themselves when he says that. And so I don't think them boys are going to have the flex to do it. But if they do have the flex to do it, oh boy, ain't no telling what Deion going to flex them into. Prize Picks is the most fun you can have by winning up to 25 times your money. Prize Picks not only makes playing daily fantasy easy, it also makes using responsible gaming tools easy as well. Prize Picks wants their members to have easy access to the resources required to support their fantasy sports experience. So learn more at prizepicks.com/responsible-gaming or directly in Prize Picks' first in-class member support help center. And make sure you go to prizepicks.com/Bomani and use code Bomani for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/Bomani. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.